This is a thought-inducing question. So yeah, let me pose something to y'all.
Oh, Lord.
I've watched several other YouTubers do the reviews on this show. I've seen, some positive ones, some negative ones. I'm I'm of the firm belief that, and I think this is a Ben Shapiro quote, but he says and he's talking about politics specifically, but in this case, the point he's making is when it comes to, he says, when you're talking about politics and your politicians, you treat it like balls and strikes in baseball. If they do something good, you praise them. If they do something bad, you criticize them. And so when I approach anything in terms of entertainment, it's the balls and strikes method, where it's like, if it's a strike, I say, okay, great. That's good. Like, well done. And if it's a ball, I'm going to say, okay, that's baloney. It shouldn't be, like, do better, basically. And so, but one of the guys that I like to watch his reviews, and just a warning for any viewers that, the language is a little colorful for a lot of his videos, but his opinions are pretty on point a lot of the time. I like some of the things that he talks about, but just forewarned, if you ever run across any of his stuff, the language might get a little rough. But we try to keep it language free on here if we can. But it's the critical drinker. I think I've shown some of y'all's his videos before. He's pretty funny, but he's got some good takes. But I was watching his final video he did for the Ahsoka season, and I ran across. I put down a quote from sort of near the end of his video, and I think it brings us into a good point as Star Wars fans. I know we're all pretty huge Star Wars fans, and we want Star Wars to be great. We want the franchise to do well, and that's why we're so passionate about it. And we love the world, the characters, whatever. But one of the things he said at the end of his review, and he's mostly negative about the show, I'll just put that out there. But he said at the end, Ahsoka is a show for the people who like the idea of Star Wars rather than the reality. People whose collective memory and understanding of the world that George Lucas created extends roughly as far back as the last forgettable Star Wars TV show. I say spit out here. He didn't say spit out. He said a different word, but spit out onto Disney Plus. People who will clap and cheer and cry like complete idiots at the appearance of something vaguely familiar without pausing for even a second to question why it's there and what the point of it is. So I'll say all that to say, the question I wanted to pose to y'all is, do we feel like the Star Wars community as a whole, have we been conditioned to accept mediocre content from our universe? Have we gotten to the point where we're just willing to lap up anything that vaguely resembles the Star Wars that we've watched before? And I just wanted to see what y'all thought about that.
The answer is yes, because we like Star Wars. And we'll get on here, we'll get on these cameras, these microphones, and we'll complain about the show. But as soon as the next show comes out, we won't go a whole other week without watching it. We will make sure to watch it. And we'll complain about that show, but we'll watch the next show. Also, slap the Star Wars name on it, and it intrigues you. There's some movie coming out in theaters sometime soon. I have no clue the name of the movie. But it looked like it was Star Wars. When I saw the promo in theaters, I thought, that's a new Star Wars movie.
It's called The Creator, by chance?
Maybe so.
That's the Gareth Edwards. I actually really want to see that.
I do too.
I mean, it looks pretty good. But when I saw that it wasn't Star Wars, I thought, well, if they had put Star Wars on it, it would have gotten double the amount of audience.
I don't know about it. I don't know. These days, it might not.
I mean,
it probably would have.
It probably, honestly, wouldn't surprise me if it would have.
But honestly, why is that? Like, why are we okay with? Because, like, I don't think there's. I think the age old argument of, like, we're passionate and critical about the things we love because we want them to be great. And I think that's great, and and we're like that about most of the things that we care about. But it's like, why? Are we doing something wrong in terms of if we see that it's not living up to the standard, why don't we just pull a Rings of Power and like all the fans just online rebelled against it and we're like, okay, we've had enough of this. If you're going to do this, we're not going to have any part of it. And they basically just reviewed it to death, which, it rightly so in a lot of ways, but at the same time, like they were up in arms about it before it even came out. So almost like a strike in some ways, where they went on strike against it and they were like, okay, if this is what you're selling us, we don't want it. And so for us, are we just kind of letting Disney get away with that? Or is it more of like, we're just okay with there's, Hayden Christensen as Anakin. Oh, there's, Tamura Morrison as Boba Fett. There's Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we're happy with that. I mean, I don't know. Where do y'all feel like that is?
I mean, the issue with that though is like the fan base is kind of split, like almost like evenly. I feel like half people and there's a lot of people that liked Obi-Wan Kenobi, like absolutely loved it, thought it was amazing type deal. And then there's a lot of people that like you that absolutely hated it. I'm kind of in the middle where I like, all right, it wasn't terrible. It was bad, but like it wasn't like good.
Where does that keep it then? It's not.
I don't know, but I'm just saying though, like more or less, I just feel like the fan base is like split to the point where like they're just gonna keep doing it because like they don't have enough people that like are like, all right, no, we're not gonna watch this type like deal. Like
there's no purist, right? So like there's no overarching like Lord of the Rings. There's like it's all written down. It's all written down. So like it would be like if George Lucas wrote down these 9 movies and everything that happened in between it, and then they didn't follow it. Like, yeah, the Star Wars fan base probably would rebel. But the fact that
how much of that do you think is the fact though that Disney basically erased a bunch of Star Wars history when they bought it? They dumped
none of that.
They dumped
even if it was endorsed by George Lucas, none of that was written by him.
But that doesn't necessarily matter when George is like, okay, I made 6 movies. Everything I made in these movies is canon. The rest is not. But like when he's not expanding outside of that, which he didn't for years, like the stuff that people write in the EU stuff, that is canon for fans because there's like George Lucas is not putting other stuff out. And so that's all they have to fill the holes in with. And so whether you agree that it's technically canon or not, it was to fans for years and years and years. And so now when Disney takes over, it's not that they just scrapped all of it. It's the fact that there were certain mechanics within the world, the lore and stuff that helped people understand how certain things worked with the Force and different things, Jedi training and those things from the books, like the different things they have to go through, the years that they train to get to where they get to, the fact that most Jedi specialize in a specific Force ability like Force healing or mind tricks or these different things. And usually that's the only thing they could master outside of, the other things. And like, you don't get a lot of that without the books and the comics and stuff. But when you get Disney in, they say, okay, we're getting rid of that. Oh, and we're giving you no rules for how all this stuff works now. And so basically they just do whatever they want to. So that's why Rey can do mind tricks and she can do Force healing and she can do all of this stuff because there's no rules against it. And
it all goes back to, I think, I would say big majority of Star Wars fans, me included, would rather have something
over nothing,
even if it's mediocre.
But you've always got something with the original stuff. That's the thing. You have it on DVD. You have the Clone Wars. You have all of that stuff that was good before. So you have stuff. Like
I'm talking about, like adding additional.
Yeah,
like, do you want more or none or no more?
Well, do you want it to be good? I mean, I think that's the problem. Like, I don't want more if it's going to be, crappy. I don't.
I would say you're probably one of the few.
I'd rather
majority of Star Wars fans would take more, even if it's mediocre.
I spent 10 years watching, between Revenge of the Sith and The Force Awakens, watching the original 6 and the Clone Wars, and I was perfectly content. I don't.
Is that making new fans?
I mean, does it matter? I mean, and to quote Rachel Zegler on the Snow White, she's like, doesn't, kind of in a negative light, but how much of that matters when you have this massive fan? I mean, it was the most lucrative franchise financially and critically of all time until the MCU came around.
Would you rather have more money or less money?
Yeah.
And if they can put new stuff out to make a lot more money, they're going to do it. They really, I mean, at the end of the day, they don't care if the fans are happy. They just can't care if they can make more money and if they get, people to view it.
And
I mean, I know why Disney's doing it.
Like me, they're gonna go buy a ticket to go see Star Wars in theaters because it's Star Wars. So
they're gonna milk Star Wars dry.
Johnny, prove to us what you're saying. Promise here as we are recording that you will not watch another Star Wars show or movie unless it gets 80% fan reviews on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, I don't trust Rotten Tomatoes anymore. That's for dang sure. Look, we said it. We said it all at the beginning of this video. They'll put something out. We'll go watch it, and I think I said it to one. I think it might have been Bryant. I said, and you argued with me about this. I said when the new Ray movie comes out, I'm not going and watching it in theaters. And you're like, yeah, you will. And I'm like, no, I don't really have any interest in doing it, to be honest with you. I was like, I may see some reviews and see if it's worth watching, but like, I'm getting
and then
to
they'll go watch it.
I'm getting to the point, even with Star Wars, where it's like, if it's just going to be the same sludge over and over again, and it's just mired in mediocrity or less than mediocrity, I'm just like, I kind of just stick with the old stuff, I don't want, like, I love Star Wars, and I don't want my mentality to be that. But at the same time, I'm tired. Like, when you get a show like Andor, and I know there's fans out there that didn't like Andor, they say it doesn't feel like Star Wars, it's too slow, whatever. But you cannot deny the quality of the show itself, how good it looked, how well it was acted, how well it was written. You may not have liked the slower pace or the lack of Force users or whatever it is. But, like, I don't care if it's a character-driven, rebellion versus the Empire story with no Jedi, or if it's a Old Republic, Jedi versus the Sith, all-out war. The point is, if it can't be that quality for every project, is it worth throwing more and more and more out there? And I think if we're going to uphold this standard of being one of the greatest franchises of all time, the most popular, iconic things that people see when they look at entertainment, then if we're not striving for that, then I say we need to shut it all down and start over, because I just don't think
there ain't gonna be no starting over.
And I know that
if Disney sells it, it's done.
I'm 100%. I'm 100%. I'm not delusional. I understand Disney's going to keep spitting this stuff out, and I'm not debating that. But I'm saying, from where I stand with this, I just think if we're not going to try to live up to that standard, and it may be an impossible standard to reach, I think Andor is proof that it can get pretty dang close.
That's all subjective, though.
It is, but it's not subjective, and like I said, it's sort of just an objective fact that, like, certain things about a show are fantastic. Like, you can look at a show and say, that story may have sucked. I didn't like any of those characters, but man, visually it looked amazing. Like, you can't argue those things about it, and I don't think you can argue that about Andor, that it wasn't well acted, it looked good, and it was well written. I don't think there's people that can say it sucked. Like, I just don't think you can make that argument in good faith. Now, I think most of the criticism people aim towards it was that it didn't feel like Star Wars, and that's not a critique of the acting or the writing or the visuals necessarily. It's just maybe they meant we didn't have Jedi, or there wasn't Force people, or these characters were not any of the characters we're familiar with, and we didn't really care about them. But I never saw anyone lob any kind of serious, like, quality accusations at the show in terms of they did, like, acting's bad, writing's bad, the things that people typically say about shows when they're not done well. Think things we've said about other Star Wars shows. And so I think that's what I'm saying when I say, like, there's objective things about something that, like, if we can just aim for these things, then we can get to a point where everyone's genuinely excited to see the next Star Wars product. And it's not just like Bryant said at the beginning of the video, it's just a label slapped on it, and therefore people go watch it. Like, I think we should expect more from what we love than what we have gotten to this point. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
I think that's part of the reason we go back though, is because we hope that it's better.
Well, and I think it doesn't help that they like put out like, let's say, like Andor, and that gives us like a glimmer of hope. We're like,
I was
oh,
about to say,
this is
we have hope
really
that it
good.
can
Now we
be
have a
that
little bit of
way.
hope, maybe that this can actually do
Right.
well now.
But
And
I
then
think
we're let
that's
down
more of a
again.
symptom of choosing who, like, I think they need to be more strict about who they allow to do these projects. And I think that's the point, is like if someone's latched on to success, like Tony Gilroy's already done it twice with Rogue One and Andor. Like, somebody throw a fat check at that guy and get him back. Like, get him to write the majority of your stuff. Like, he doesn't
Dave
even have to do
Filoni's
the
doing
directing.
Ahsoka.
Just get him to write it.
I mean, Dave Filoni's doing Ahsoka. I mean, he talked. You know that Gilded Clone Wars show you talk about. He did that.
He did, and look, I'm not taking anything away from what Filoni's done in animation, and I've said that before. I'll say it again. I think Filoni may be the best Star Wars mind in terms of the lore and understanding the universe that there is out there outside of George Lucas. I've said that before, and I'll say it again. And that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'll argue night and day that he's probably not the best live-action director and producer, and I think that's, just a lack of experience in that area. He's an animated guy. He always has been an animated guy. And like, could he get there someday? Maybe, but I think you'd be better off leaving him to help write or sort of fill out the Star Wars aspect of things, and then let someone with that directing and producing pedigree come in and do the other stuff. And that stuff, like, I think me and Drew were talking about it last week. I said I think the dream sort of scenario for me would be like Gilroy writes a movie. Filoni comes in and helps produce the movie, and then someone like Jon Favreau directs the movie. And those are guys that are all doing things that they excel at. And you have what I think would turn into, like, if they were to do an Heir to the Empire, like, sequel movie to Ahsoka, that's how they should do it. Like, having Filoni do all of that, I just don't think he's got the movie chops to be able to do it. And I think that's what we would just end up with something.
You'll probably get it, and you'll probably go watch it.
I feel like I need to make a bet at some point on here and be like, I will not.
I'll change my Disney Plus password.
Yeah,
so you can't watch it no more. So you're not even tempted.
I don't know. I just kind of wanted to see y'all's thoughts on that, where you landed with it. If it's even something that we, is that something that even the larger fan base is thinking of? And because you see other fan bases do it, and like I said, we said, Lord of the Rings may be a lot different in terms of stuff being written down, but I don't think that changes the response of things, and how if you get tired of something long enough, you're just kind of like, put your foot down and say, do better, or we're just going to stop showing up.
Well, I think it's all so subjective, right? Because there's so many people that are fans of Star Wars, so many different people, that even if our whole segment, I would say we kind of all dwell in one segment of Star Wars fans. We all, maybe Johnny further negative, but we're all, we've all kind of been sort of negative about a lot of the stuff that's come out, but not so negative that we're going to boycott it. Even if we got to the point where we were boycotting it, I still think that's not going to make.
Well, they're still
going to put out a lot of stuff. They may not put out as much, but they're still going to put out Star Wars stuff, because there's still going to be a significant portion of the fan base that goes and watches it or pays attention or whatever.
Well, you saw a large
goes to see it outweighs the fan base that doesn't go see it.
Well, is that true though? Because like we saw after The Last Jedi, that people are boycotted Solo and they just didn't go watch it, and it lost money. Like, is that even a valid argument for?
Well, that's because after 3 movies of, even 3 bad movies of killing it, that movie was already almost done by the time the 3rd one came out. So they'd already spent their money.
So by that point, we'd only had Force Awakens, Rogue One, which was universally liked by You mean the vast majority of the fan base, and then you had The Last Jedi, which kind of split it right down the middle. So
I don't know about straight down the middle, but
well, the reviews of it play that out, and they actually skews it more towards dislike than
I
like.
was about to
Because
say that was. I think most people generally agree that that's probably the worst.
The worst thing that we've
you
ever
have
had.
two camps. You either get people who think it's the worst, and people who think it's the best thing since Empire Strikes Back. So
Like,
I
right?
don't know that
I've heard people say it. I've seen many an article on some of these major media outlets saying the same thing without having it ranked in the top three. And I'm like,
that's just Disney paying people money to write down that it was good.
So what does Brian have it ranked at now? Didn't he love it at first when he came out of the movie theater?
yes, he did.
It was the first one I'd seen in a long time. Never judge anything from the very first time you see it. Always give it a second look before you judge it.
Hey, I've told this story plenty of times before, but other than Ethan's like telling the guy to get his own seat in the theater, other than that story, that we walked out of The Last Jedi and everybody's like, buzzing about it, and of course they all have to turn to me at the end, and I'm like, they're like, I think that was I think Brian said something like, I think that's the best one I've seen since like the original trilogy or something. I don't remember what the exact quote was, but. And then they all turned to me and they're like, "What did you think?" And I was like, "I kind of hated it." I was like, "I didn't like. I just remember sitting there being bored watching it, and I'm like, I should not be bored sitting in a Star Wars movie."
Listen, it's
Ever.
hard for me to during. This is how much negative a movie has to be for me to right after it be like that was terrible. So just imagine, like, if for something, it would have to be. Like, oh my, it'd have to be terrible. Because a lot of times I'm just sitting watching a movie and just taking it from what it is. And then I have to like go and think about it. And I'm like, I really don't like that. So the fact that Johnny knew right at the end.
Yeah, I'm with you. I rarely go into a movie and I'm just like, now there are some these days. My critical lens is a little bit more focused in than it used to be. Like I can sit and watch a movie and be like,
that being too negative.
okay, somebody has to be. So, but nowadays I can sit and watch a movie and I'll be like, yeah, no, I didn't like that, or yeah, that was good, and but
You can watch it twice or
usually just once nowadays I can watch something. Now there have been some movies I've gone back and watched later where I've been like, okay, that wasn't as good as I remember, or oh, that was worse than I remember, or oh, that was kind of better than the first time I watched it. Now that's happened to me plenty of times before. The Last Jedi was not one of those. I went back and watched it like 3 days later, and it was still about as sucky as the first time I watched it. So because I had to go back, I was like, I had a free day that Sunday afternoon.
You didn't
and
let
it
age well. Like you didn't
Like,
let
I
it
had-
age like enough. I mean,
No,
give
I
it
was
like a
like,
couple
let's
years,
put a
then
week.
watch it. Maybe
No, I was like, I need to go back and make sure that was as bad as I thought it was. Like, I missed something, and so I went back and watched it again, and I was like, "Yep, still bad." Okay. Oh.
anyway. The
But
point.
yeah.
The point is, I think even if it would have something would have to be like worse than The Last Jedi, which is going to be hard to do, to make Star Wars fans just not go. And even then, I still think they would go.
So, like a Ray movie, people are gonna go.
I mean, yeah, the Last Jedi was terrible.
A lot of people
Still went to
would.
see Rise of Skywalker, so it's like I really wouldn't be surprised. I mean,
yeah, even after The Last Jedi, people went and watched The Rise of Skywalker.
exactly. So, I mean, regardless, people are going to go watch it. And, like, that's just how it's going to be.
I mean, I may, I'm like you. I may wait and see if it's going to be worth my time.
Yeah,
To go
probably
watch.
not. You'll be in it opening weekend.
Ah,